Okay, so I'm going to make this one quick, but I'm just going to come out and say it. Fuck pedantry. Fuck pedantry. If you don't know what the word means, it basically means being very, let's say, precise over grammar. At least that's the context I want to talk about it, excuse me, in. Um, there are some people out there who really, really obsess over written grammar and spoken grammar in the way that people write things down. Now, if you're a teacher and you're marking exam papers or you're marking a student's work, then of course you need to be pedantic because that goes in line with marking the work. And if you're applying for a job application or something, you obviously want to make your work audible, tidy, and so on. But what really irritates me is people who take it on themselves to kind of make such an issue out of someone else's grammar. Now, if the grammar is so bad that it is unintelligible, that is to say that it is so bad that you can't make out, then I totally understand the contention. But when people are nitpicking at relatively minor things, then to me it indicates something about their priority if they're actually looking at that rather than the content of what someone is saying. So my line of thinking is, does it really, really, really matter in the grand scheme of things if someone's punctuation isn't quite right? No, it doesn't. Because if you're the sort of person, frankly, that is weighing in on that rather than the content of what someone is saying, then it says a lot really about where your priorities are. I mean, the thing is, most people who know me consider me to be a pretty intelligent person. And without wanting to sound egotistical, I think I'm pretty well informed on things. I think I'm intelligent. But sometimes when I'm speaking, and this has been clear in some of my videos, I'm trying to find the right word, for example, and the word just doesn't come to my mind. Because I make videos spontaneously. I don't sort of plan my videos. I make them very spontaneously. Sometimes I'm looking for the right word, and it's not that I don't know the word, it's just that it doesn't come to mind immediately. So I kind of procrastinate as I'm thinking about it. And, you know, grammar is important, but I really, really, really don't believe that it's the most important aspect of human communication. And people who treat it like it is, or people who treat such pedantic structure of sentences or paragraphs and so on really, really need to get a life as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, there's certain contexts. If you're a teacher and you're marking exam papers, that's fine because that's you're doing your job. But people who think that they're being smart by pointing out someone else's minor grammar fallacies, as far as I'm concerned, they really need to get a life. Because the most important thing when it comes to human communication, and I'm talking in the context here of the same language, is that the other person understands what you're talking about. They understand the gist of your argument. Okay? When I'm listening to someone, if their grammar is not perfect, you know what? I'm not going to waste time correcting them to make myself feel good. It's petty and it's childish, and it proves absolutely fuck all, to be quite honest. Um, it's a bit like you get people who may study hard and pass all their exams, but they actually have very little knowledge of the working world and the reality of the world. So they may actually be pretty clueless about things that are going on, but they just happen to be good at, they've revised, they've done well, and maybe they've got like 95% pass rates. But when it comes to actually knowing about what is going on in the world and the working world, they actually don't know a lot. So being good in one particular area, for example, grammar, doesn't make you all knowing in other areas. And I think it is incredibly snobby. And I've seen kind of excuses for this, like, oh, there's nothing wrong with being educated or something. That really isn't the issue because actually it shows a lack of intelligence if you think that someone's grammar is more important than the content of what they are saying. And like I say, I understand if the grammar is so bad that really does sound like someone who has been inbreeding for 30 years has written it, where the grammar is so bad that it really is like, what the hell is this person saying? But when someone's grammar is completely readable, but there are a few minor issues, and then someone goes out of the way to point that out, I'm thinking, for fuck's sake, get a life. I'm sorry for the colorful language I'm using, but it does irritate me. Um, because it just demonstrates that those people have to feel good about themselves by trying to humiliate someone else through something that really is a non-issue or should be a non-issue. Um, the vast majority of human communication, people don't give a damn about grammar. What they care about is whether or not the other person understands. It's so that sort of pedantry just irritates me because it is just not necessary. It's just not. And people who have this smug idea that it makes them really intelligent by pointing it out, actually all they're doing is making themselves look petty. If you genuinely can't understand what someone is saying, that's a different matter. And I have come across people whose grammar is so awful that, yeah, you do need to say something. But what bugs me is when people have just minor mistakes, and sometimes there isn't even mistakes, and you get some smart ass person who thinks that they are being clever, but as far as I'm concerned, they're just making themselves look petty. The most important thing is that you understand what the other person is saying. And as far as I'm concerned, when someone is in a debate situation and all they can do is point out the other person's grammar, then they're actually losing the argument because they're not actually coming up with a response. They're just coming up with that sort of ad hominem attack, and it is ridiculous. Grammar is important, but it is not the most important aspect of communication. It's really not. The most important aspect of communication is understanding the context in which the person is speaking. And there are other issues, by the way. For example, issues like dyslexia and so on that could impact the way someone writes that is beyond their control. So, kind of mocking them doesn't make you look clever. It makes you actually look like a bully in some ways. Um, I judge someone's intelligence uh, based on the depth of their argument, based on their capability of producing a sound argument. I don't judge someone's intelligence based on their grammar. Some of the most successful, intelligent people have not been pedants when it comes to grammar. Albert Einstein is an example. Some very successful people. I'm reading the Reagan diaries. Now, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, no one can dispute that Ronald Reagan was politically, at least, a successful president insofar as electorally speaking. Now, looking through his diaries, his basic grammar was not wonderful. But this was a man who achieved 8 years of electoral victory. So people really need to see the bigger picture and not weigh so much on, frankly, things that the vast majority of people really don't care about. Like I say, if you're a teacher, you're marking exams, that's a different matter. If you are interviewing someone for a job and so on. So, yeah, there are some situations where grammar matters, probably in the acting industry as well. Um, then again, even in the acting industry and even in literature, say, for example, you're writing a character who is really working class, or they speak in a certain dialect, or they have broken English or whatever, the way that you're writing that character, you're actually not going to the sort of grammar will be broken anyway because it ties in with the way the character is speaking. Um, and I think sometimes there is a snobbish aspect to this, which is actually quite off-putting. So let me know your thoughts. Do you think and one more point, there is a difference between British and American grammar because I said something on Facebook on a thread to do with the Republican primaries, and the guy that didn't like what I said was pointing out my grammar mistakes. Well, I reviewed my comments several times and I couldn't see any mistakes, so I guess that was just an American English versus British English thing. So that's another issue. But let me know your thoughts. Do you think that having 100% perfect grammar is really the most important thing? Or do you agree with me that people who weigh in on this need to see the bigger picture and not make such an issue out of something that really shouldn't be such an issue? Like I say, I fully appreciate the argument that sometimes people have such bad grammar that you can't make out a word they're saying. Where the sentence structure is so bad that you're thinking, what are they trying to say? But when you can make someone out, and and this is a bit like language as well, because when I hear someone, when someone asks me a question and I know for a fact that English isn't their first language, you have to cut people slack. You have to make allowances for the fact that English is not their first language. So there are some British people, and I imagine some Americans as well, who won't give any flexibility. They'll just kind of stubbornly want to hear perfect English, and they won't give any allowance to the fact that the person is trying their best. So when I hear someone and I know that English isn't their first language, I am not going to, even though I'm from a teaching background, I am not going to make that person damage that person's confidence by correcting every little thing they say. If I understand what they're asking, I will I will work with that. And I will help them out, and I will but if you understand what someone's saying, don't humiliate them by correcting every single thing they're saying unless they're asking you to. But I don't think that's particularly clever. I mean, I wouldn't like if I was trying my level best in a certain language and someone who spoke that language fluently kind of looked down on me and treated me like a complete imbecile. It's not clever. If you can understand the basic issue of what someone is saying, then cut some allowance for the fact that English isn't their first language. People need to just see the bigger picture sometimes. Let me know your thoughts.